Welcome to Story Loft, a gentle refuge for hearts that feel like they are carrying the weight of the world, and for those who are there for them. Today, we are opening a window into the lives of 3 individuals who've walked the challenging path of anxiety. These stories are shared with courage, reminding us that we are not alone in our struggles. Anxiety can feel like a heavy fog, obscuring the joys of life, but within each story we find threads of hope. Here at Story Loft, we understand, we see you, your fears, your worries, your restless nights. They are all valid. This is a place where your experiences are heard and honored. If you have a story nestled in your heart, one that might reach out and touch someone else who struggles with anxiety, we would be privileged to hear it. You can share your journey with us at storyloft@outlook.com. You can also find this email in the description box below. Your words, your experiences, they matter. They could be the comfort someone else needs to hear, the reassurance that helps them breathe a little bit easier. As we share these stories, we invite you to find a quiet moment, take a deep breath, allow yourself to just simply be, without judgment. You are in a safe space here. If these stories resonate with you, if they bring you a hint of understanding or peace, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us reach more people who might be feeling overwhelmed by anxiety. Now, let's gently open our hearts and minds to these 3 stories of individuals facing anxiety. Their journeys tell us that even in our most anxious moments, we're connected by our shared human experience. Jenna Larson stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the haggard face staring back at her. Dark circles like bruises nestled themselves beneath her bloodshot eyes. They were a glaring contrast to her pale skin. Her once vibrant blonde hair now hung limp and lackluster, hastily pulled back into a messy ponytail. She gripped the edges of the sink, her knuckles turning white as she tried to steady herself. "Get it together," she whispered harshly to herself, willing the gnawing anxiety in her stomach to subside. But the feeling persisted. These days it was a constant companion that had taken up residence in her body over the past few months. It was always there now, sometimes a dull ache, other times a sharp, stabbing sensation that left her gasping for air. And let's not forget about the times she would be sitting in silence, reading a book, when all of a sudden the heart palpitations would start. At 42 years old, Jenna was the youngest chief financial officer in her company's history. She had clawed her way to the top through pure determination and an impressive work ethic. 70-hour work weeks were not unheard of, and she wore her exhaustion like a badge of honor. Sleep was a luxury she could not afford, not when there were reports to analyze, strategies to develop, and endless meetings to attend. But lately, the cost of her ambition was becoming painfully apparent. The panic attacks had started small. A racing heart here, a bout of dizziness there. She brushed them off as simple stress. Nothing a good night's sleep couldn't fix. That is, if she ever allowed herself to have a good night's sleep. But they grew in intensity and frequency until she found herself here, locked in the executive bathroom, trying desperately to pull herself together before the board meeting. Jenna splashed cold water on her face, the shock of it momentarily cutting through the grip of anxiety. Drying her face, She reapplied her makeup that served as a mask of a competent executive sliding back into place. But beneath the surface, a storm was raging. As she strode into the boardroom, Jenna felt the familiar tightening in her chest. The faces around the table blurred as she took her seat, the voices of her colleagues becoming a dull mishmash of words in her ears. She gripped her pen tightly, focusing on the sensation of the cool metal against her clammy palm, trying to anchor herself in the present moment. "Jenna, the Q3 projections?" The voice of the CEO cut through her spiraling thoughts. Jenna blinked, realizing with horror that she had no idea what had been discussed for the past 10 minutes. Her heart raced again, and she could feel beads of sweat forming at her hairline. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?" she managed to stammer out, hating the tremor in her voice. The concern in her colleague's eyes only heightened her panic. This wasn't her. She was always prepared, always on top of things. What was happening to her? The meeting trudged on, but Jenna was barely present. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. She'd be fired, her career in ruins. She'd lose everything she worked so hard for. The thoughts swirled faster and faster until she felt she might be sick. When the meeting finally ended, Jenna practically ran back to her office, closing the door behind her with a soft click. She collapsed into her chair, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The room spun around her as the full weight of her anxiety crashed down. "Miss Larson?" Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 2:00 is here." Jenna closed her eyes, willing the world to stop for just a moment. But it never did. There was always another meeting, another deadline, another crisis to avert. She had built her life around this relentless pace, but now it felt like it was killing her. With trembling fingers, Jenna reached for her phone and did something she had never done before. She canceled her appointments for the rest of the day. The relief was immediate, but short-lived, quickly replaced by a crushing feeling of guilt and failure. As she drove home in a daze, the streets of the city blurring past her window, Jenna felt utterly lost. Her apartment, when she finally reached it, felt foreign and unlived in. Takeout containers littered the kitchen counter. A thin layer of dust coated every surface. When was the last time she had actually spent more than a few waking hours here? Jenna sank into her couch, the silence of the apartment pressing in on her. Without the constant stimulation of work, she felt adrift, unsure of what to do with herself. The anxiety that had been her constant companion surged forward, no longer held at bay by the frenzied pace of her workday. Her breath quickened, and she could feel the telltale signs of a panic attack approaching. But this time, instead of fighting it, Jenna gave in. She curled into herself, sobs racking her body as months of pent-up emotion poured out of her. She cried for the person she used to be, for the life she had sacrificed in pursuit of success, for the relationships she had let wither away. As the tears subsided, leaving her feeling wrung out and empty, Jenna knew something had to change. She could not go on like this. The cost was just too high. With shaking hands, she reached for her laptop and began to type an email to HR requesting a leave of absence, another to her doctor, scheduling an appointment to discuss her anxiety, and finally, one to her estranged sister, reaching out after years of silence. The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's appointments, therapy sessions, and long conversations with family members who had become strangers. Jenna felt raw and exposed, stripped of the armor she had built around herself, but slowly and painfully, she began to heal. She rediscovered old hobbies. The piano gathering dust in the corner of her living room, the half-finished novel languishing in her desk drawer. She started taking long walks in the park near her apartment, marveling at the changing color of the leaves and the simple pleasures of fresh air. Most importantly, Jenna began to reconnect with the people in her life. She had lunch with old friends, laughing and talking for hours. She flew home to visit her parents, spending quiet evenings playing board games and catching up on lost time. And she began rebuilding her relationship with her sister, mending the bridges she had burned in her single-minded pursuit of success. Over time, as the weeks turned into months, Jenna felt the iron grip of anxiety loosening. She still had bad days, moments when the old fears would resurface, threatening to put her back into the abyss. But she had tools now, coping mechanisms that helped her weather the storms. When it came time to return to work, Jenna approached it with a new perspective. She set boundaries, leaving the office at reasonable hours and turning off her work phone in the evenings. She delegated more, trusting her team to handle tasks she would have previously insisted on doing herself. And she made time for the things that truly mattered: family dinners, weekend getaways, quiet moments of reflection. To her surprise, her work did not suffer. If anything, she found herself more focused, more creative, and more effective in her role. The constant fog of anxiety had lifted, allowing her to see changes and opportunities with newfound clarity. 1 year after her breakdown in the boardroom, Jenna stood at the podium at a company-wide meeting. The face that looked back at her from the teleprompter was transformed, clear-eyed, relaxed, with a genuine smile playing at her lips. "Today, I want to talk to you about balance," she began, her voice strong and steady. "Not just the balance sheets we pore over every day, but the balance in our lives. I stand before you not just as your CFO, but as someone who has learned the hard way that success at the cost of everything else is no success at all." As she shared her story, Jenna saw heads nodding in recognition. She saw relief in the eyes of colleagues who had been struggling silently with their own battles. And she felt, for the first time in years, truly at peace with herself and her place in the world. The anxiety that had once threatened to consume her would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. Jenna had rediscovered the joy in her work, the richness of her relationships, and the simple pleasures of a life well lived. She had found her balance, and in doing so, had become not just a better executive, but a better person. As she finished her speech, to the thunderous applause, Jenna knew this was her true success story. Not the titles or the accolades, but the story to reclaim her life and find harmony in a world that too often glorified imbalance. And as she stepped down from the podium, she silently vowed to help others find their own path to balance, one day at a time. Ethan Foster stood before the gleaming facade of Nexus Innovations, the tech startup he had built from the ground up. The morning sun reflected off of the building's glass exterior, but Ethan felt no warmth. Instead, a familiar chill of anxiety crept up his spine as he pushed through the revolving doors. At 35 years old, Ethan had once been a poster child for Silicon Valley success. Nexus Innovations had burst onto the scene 3 years ago with a revolutionary AI-driven personal assistant that had tech giants scrambling to keep up. accolades, investors, and glowing press coverage had followed in quick succession. But now, as Ethan rode the elevator to the top floor, that initial triumph felt like a distant memory. The doors opened to reveal a bustling office space. Developers huddled over screens, marketers chatted energetically, and the air hummed with the energy of creation. Yet Ethan felt disconnected from it all, as if observing the scene through thick, dirty glasses. "Morning, boss," his assistant chirped, falling into stride beside him. "The team leads are waiting in the conference room for the strategy meeting." Ethan nodded, his throat suddenly dry. Strategy meetings had once been his forte, a chance to inspire his team and chart the course for Nexus' future. Now, they filled him with dread. As he entered the conference room, 6 expectant faces turned towards him. Ethan forced a smile, acutely aware of the dark circles under his eyes and the slight tremor in his gait. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice sounding hollow to his own ears. "Let's dive in, shall we?" For the next hour, Ethan listened as his team presented updates and proposals. Each word seemed to add to the weight that was pressing down on his chest. The marketing lead spoke of declining user engagement. The head of development detailed delays in the next software update. The CFO's cautious projections for the quarter hung in the air like a looming storm cloud. Ethan's mind raced, conjuring worst-case scenarios with alarming clarity. What if users abandoned their platform en masse? What if a competitor beat them to market with a superior product? What if they couldn't secure the next round of funding? "Ethan, what do you think?" The question snapped him back to reality. All eyes were on him, waiting for guidance, for decisions. Ethan opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. I need some time to consider all of this," he finally managed. "Let's reconvene tomorrow." Confusion and concern flitted across his team's faces, but they nodded and began to file out. Ethan remained seated, staring blankly at the notes he had scribbled during his meeting, a jumble of half-formed ideas and anxious scribbles. Once alone, Ethan let out a shaky breath. He'd founded Nexus Innovations with a clear vision and a steadfast confidence. When had that certainty been replaced by this paralyzing fear? He stood abruptly, needing to escape the suffocating confines of the conference room. Ethan found himself wandering the office floor, observing his employees at work. They all seemed so focused, so sure of their purpose. He envied their certainty. In the break room, a heated discussion caught his attention. "We should be pushing harder on the new features," argued a young developer. "Our competitors are catching up." "But rushing could compromise quality," countered another. "We need to maintain our standards." Ethan lingered, unnoticed in the doorway. Once he would have jumped into such debates, mediating and guiding, but now indecision gripped him. Both arguments had merit, but the thought of making the wrong choice paralyzed him. Back in the office, Ethan slumped into his chair. His gaze fell on the awards lining the shelves, each one now feeling like an accusation. What if he had just been lucky? What if he wasn't cut out for all of this? A knock at the door jolted him from his spiral. "Come in," he called, straightening in his seat. Maya, his COO and longtime friend, entered with a concerned expression. "Ethan, we need to talk about the investors' meeting next week. They're expecting concrete plans for the expansion." The mention of the meeting sent a fresh wave of anxiety through Ethan. He'd been avoiding thinking about it, burying himself in day-to-day operations instead of tackling the bigger picture. "I'm working on it," he lied, the words tasting bitter. Maya's frown deepened. "Ethan, what's going on?" You've been different lately, distant. The team is starting to notice. Ethan opened his mouth to deny it, to assure her everything was fine. But the lie died on his lip. Instead, to his horror, he felt tears welling up in his eyes. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Maya," he whispered, the admission feeling like both a defeat and a relief. "Every decision feels impossible. What if I make the wrong choice and everything falls apart?" Maya's expression softened. She pulled up a chair sitting across from Ethan. "Ethan, do you remember why we started Nexus?" He nodded slowly. "To change the way people interact with technology. To make lives easier." "Exactly," Maya said firmly. "That vision hasn't changed. Yes, the stakes are higher now. Yes, there's more pressure. But you're not alone in this. We're a team, remember?" Ethan took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. The anxiety was still there. It was a constant low hum in the background of his mind, but for the first time in months, he felt a tiny spark of his old determination reignite. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been letting my fears dictate everything. It's time to change that." Maya smiled, relief evident on her face. "That's the Ethan I know. Now, how about we tackle that expansion plan together?" As they bent over his desk brainstorming ideas, Ethan felt some of the tension leave his body. The path ahead, while still daunting, filled with potential pitfalls and tough decisions. His anxiety wouldn't disappear overnight, but he was determined to stop letting it control him, to rediscover the passion and the drive that had brought him this far. Ethan Foster, the visionary founder of Nexus Innovations, wasn't finished yet. He had a company to lead, a team to inspire, and a future to shape. It was time to rebuild his crumbling fortress of confidence, one decision at a time. Liam Parker stood before the mirror in his cramped studio apartment, rehearsing lines for an audition he knew he would not attend. His reflection stared back at him, a study in nervous energy. Fingers fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, eyes darting away from their own gaze, shoulders hunched as if to make himself smaller. At 28 years old, Liam had dreamed of becoming an actor since childhood. He'd excelled in drama classes, losing himself in characters and finding a freedom on stage that eluded him in real life. But as he grew older, the scrutiny of audiences began to weigh on him. The thought of all those eyes, all those judgments, became overwhelming. Liam's social anxiety had crept up on him slowly, like a vine gradually entangling a tree. What started as simple nervousness before performances evolved into full-blown panic attacks. The last time he'd attempted an in-person audition, he'd frozen completely, unable to utter a single word before fleeing the room. Now, he rarely left his apartment except for his part-time job at the local bookstore. Even those shifts were a struggle. Each interaction with a customer was an exercise in controlling his breathing and fighting the urge to run. Liam sighed, turning away from the mirror. His gaze fell on the stacks of acting books and scripts piled high on his desk. Dreams deferred, gathering dust. He approached them hesitantly, running his fingers along the spines. Despite everything, the passion still burned within him. It was a quiet, burning flame refusing to be extinguished. Just then his phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his agent, Melissa. He read the words. New opportunity. Voiceover edition for animated series. Interested? Liam's pulse quickened. A mix of excitement and apprehension stirred in his belly like strange butterflies. Voiceover work. His mind explored further. No cameras. No audiences. Just him and a microphone? Could this be a way back into the world he loved? With cautious excitement and trembling fingers, he typed out a reply. Yes, please send the details. The next day found Liam pacing his apartment, the audition script clutched in his hand. He'd spent the night rehearsing, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of learning lines. But now, as the time approached to record his audition, doubt began to creep in. What if his voice shook? What if he stumbled over the words? What if they could somehow sense his anxiety through the recording? Liam closed his eyes, forcing himself to take deep breaths. He thought of all the times he'd retreated, all the opportunities he'd let slip away. Not this time, he told himself. This time he would push through. Setting up his makeshift recording space, a closet lined with blankets for sound dampening, Liam felt a strange calm settle over him. Here in this tiny dark space, he was hidden from the world. Here he could become someone else without fear of judgment. As he began to read the lines, something remarkable happened. The anxiety that had been with him for so long faded into the background, and in its place rose the character, a swashbuckling space pirate with a heart of gold. Liam's voice grew stronger, more confident as he lost himself in the role. When he finished recording, Liam sat in stunned silence for a moment. For the first time in years, he'd completed an audition without a panic attack. A small smile pulled at his lips as he sent off the file to Melissa. The next few days passed by, and each one was a battle against the urge to obsess over the audition. Liam threw himself into his work at the bookstore, finding small victories in each customer interaction he managed without stumbling. The possibilities of the voiceover role lingered in the back of his mind, a fragile little hope that he dared not examine too closely. A week later, Liam's phone rang. He stared at Melissa's name on the screen, and his stomach did flip-flops. Liam knew that this phone call had the potential to make a huge difference in his world, and so, with a deep breath, he answered. Liam? Great news! They loved your audition. The role is yours if you want it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Liam gripped the edge of his desk, steadying himself. Really? He managed to stammer out. Really, Melissa confirmed, her voice warm with pride. They said your performance had exactly the mix of bravado and vulnerability they were looking for. Are you in? Yeah, Liam breathed, surprising himself with his immediate response. Yes, I'm in. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation and recording sessions. Each time Liam stepped into the studio, he felt the familiar tendrils of anxiety trying to take hold. But as soon as he put on the headphones and stepped up to the microphone, a transformation occurred. He became Captain Zane Starstrider, fearless explorer of the galaxy, leaving William and his fears behind. As the episodes began to air, Liam found himself cautiously engaging with the world again. He joined online forums for the show, hiding behind a username, but enjoying the positive reactions to his character. James praised Captain Starstrider's charisma and depth, unaware that the man behind the voice struggled to order coffee without stuttering. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Liam's confidence began to grow. The success of the show led to more voiceover opportunities. Audiobooks, commercials, even a few video game characters. With each new role, each positive review, the grip of anxiety loosened a little more. One sunny afternoon, about a year after his first audition, Liam found himself walking through the local park. He overheard two teenagers excitingly discussing the latest episode of his show. "Captain Starstrider is such a badass," one of them gushed. "I wish I could be that confident." Liam smiled to himself, a warmth spreading through his chest. He thought about how he had felt a year ago, trapped in his apartment, believing his dream was forever out of reach. Now, here he was, inspiring others without them even knowing it. As he continued his walk, Liam's mind wandered to a new opportunity Melissa had mentioned. A live panel at a sci-fi convention. The thought of appearing in front of an audience still sent a shiver of fear through him. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel impossible. That evening, Liam stood before his mirror again. This time, instead of averting his gaze, he met his own eyes steadily. He saw the changes there, the spark of passion reignited, and the quiet determination that had carried him through this past year. "My name is Liam Parker," he said softly. Then, with growing strength, "And I am Captain Zane Starstrider, explorer of galaxies, friend to aliens, and scourge of space pirates everywhere." He laughed, the sound full and genuine. The anxiety was still there, a shadow at the edges of his mind. But it no longer defined him. Liam had found his voice, literally and figuratively, and he was ready to keep pushing forward, one line at a time. As he picked up his phone to call Melissa about the convention, Liam felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. But alongside it was something else. Excitement? Possibility? The thrill of new horizons? He was an actor, after all, and the universe of stories was his to explore. "Hey, Melissa?" he said when she answered, his voice steady and clear. "About that panel. I think I'm ready to give it a shot." The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, times when the anxiety threatened to overwhelm him again. But Liam was no longer facing it alone. He had his characters, his growing confidence, and the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful performances happen when no one can see your face. As he hung up the phone, Liam caught his reflection in the mirror once more. The man looking back at him stood a little straighter and smiled a little easier. He wasn't Captain Starstrider, not really. But he was Liam Parker, voice actor, performer, and gradually master of his own fears. And for now, that was more than enough. As our time together comes to a close, I want to thank you for joining us at Storyloft. The 3 stories we've shared about people living with anxiety remind us of the quiet strength we all carry within. To each person watching, whether these stories reflect your own experiences or have opened your heart to others, your presence here is a gift. You've helped create a gentle, understanding space just by listening. Storyloft is a peaceful corner where we can share our truths without fear. If you have a story you would like to share, we're here to listen with open hearts. You can reach us at storyloft@outlook.com. You'll find this address waiting for you in the description below. When you like and subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel, you're helping to grow a community of kindness. Each small action ripples outwards, potentially reaching someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. As we part ways, remember that your journey, with all its challenges and triumphs, is deeply meaningful. You matter, and your presence in this world is important. Be gentle with yourself. Know that we are here holding a quiet space for you whenever you need to return. Until next time, May you find moments of peace and know that you are cared for, just as you are.